Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm Gilles Gallant. I'm joined by Evan Abrams each and every week. He is our research director here at the Action Network and my partner in crime as we do these podcasts. We're going to dive into all of the Sunday NFL action for Week 7. Brandon Anderson will have his hot reads later in the show for Week 8. And Patrick Everson from Vegas Insider, he'll give us an update on the sportsbooks of Vegas and how they fared this NFL Sunday. But before we dive into Sunday action, Evan, let's look at Monday Night Football. 49ers, Vikings. Niners at 6.5-point road favorites. Over under at 44. I'll be honest, I was looking at this game a lot from more of a touchdown prop and interception prop standpoint. But the more that I dive into it, Evan, I really do kind of like the Vikings in this side.
Sure.
And again, I sound crazy even saying that out loud, especially because of how the Niners are this season. But a lot of injuries for the Niners coming into this game. You know, Christian McCaffrey, he's going to play, but, you know, backups like Jordan Mason and Eli Mitchell, they're going to get some work. So it's going to have to be a full team effort. And every game that the Vikings play comes down to one score. You know that it's going to come down to like this last kind of drive. You know, even if they're trailing in the fourth quarter, we've seen them come back, push the ball. So I kind of like the Vikings on this side. What are you thinking for a side total in this game?
So I got a bunch of stuff here. I kind of like the first quarter Vikings. I think they could start out hot. You maybe get a lead. Purdy's been kind of a different quarterback on the road. So I believe I got to like 150, 160. I thought that was interesting. I'm always giving out a touchdown or two. I think Brandon Powell and Osborne are probably the two guys I would look at from the Minnesota side. I've seen Powell as high as like 30-1 for first touchdown, which could be a good flyer. And I think the thing that everyone will talk about when you bring up this game is just the history with Kirk Cousins and Monday Night Football. 2-10, I believe, is the number in his career. So, I mean, not great. He started 40 primetime games, which is, you know, high profile. So night, playoffs, overseas Saturday, etc. 15-25 against the spread. So not so hot, but I think this is a decent spot. And, you know, on that turf in Minnesota, you know, San Francisco could be a bit of a different team. The stat that's a little scary, can Cousins pull the upset? As an underdog of 4 points or more, he's 7-24 straight up. So maybe not the full game upset, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to commit to a Vikings win.
Yeah,
Really,
that's not where I was at either.
yeah. Yeah, but I think just where we're at the number, and I think with the Niners being more of a public team, maybe you might see a 7 pop up, and then obviously you want to jump on the Vikings immediately. But at a 6.5, you know, I could understand the reservations. I still think, though, getting the Vikings with points at home, the way that they pass, you know, how much Kirk Cousins has been blitzed this year and still having success
Yeah.
throwing, that's kind of why I like them to keep this game close, but I can't really commit to like an over or under for a total. But from a prop standpoint, really like Brock Purdy interception in this game. It's around plus 165. It's got a really high bad ball rate. Vikings, they blitz the most in the NFL. And according to Nick Giffen and our predictive analytics team, you know, that has Sean Kerner and Billy Ward, Brock Purdy is one of the luckiest quarterbacks in the NFL based on his bad ball rate and the fact that he only has 1 interception this year. So I think that this is a spot where he could definitely throw an interception in this spot, especially around plus 165. But for a touchdown prop, I think you just got to look at Brandon Ayuk and Ronnie Bell. You want to look at the outside wide receivers for the Vikings because they do play a lot of man coverage. Outside receivers, those are the ones that can convert on a defense like this. And if the Vikings somehow get a lead, you know, Ayuk's going to be on the field for that chance to be able to maybe tie it up. And for the Viking side, I think the same thing. You want to look at KJ Osborne. He's playing over 90% of snaps since Justin Jefferson is out. He's over plus 300. So it's between him and Jordan Addison is who's wide receiver 1 right now in that offense. So the fact that you're able to get at least a wide receiver 2 who's playing over 90% of snaps over plus 300. I know the Niners defense is pretty tough, but again, you know, Kirk Cousins is going to throw probably 40 times in this game, right? So I think it's a safe bet to look at passing touchdowns for the Vikings. All right, Evan, let's look now at Sunday Night Football, and let's just talk about what happened here this Sunday. So 6 teams on bye this week. We've got the Panthers, Bengals, Cowboys, Texans, Jets, and Titans all on bye this week. And home teams 8-4 and 9-3 against the spread. But Evan, please expand on this more. Totals 7-5 to the under again this week.
Yeah, we actually thought we were going to get an over week. Over goes 1-0 on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, we did.
Over goes 4-2 in the early window. So overs start 5-2, and then 4-0 unders in the late afternoon, and then Sunday Night Football. Eagles just sit on the ball at the end there, stays under the total. So unders now 7-5 this week, and the significance there is just this crazy stat kind of continues, which is the last 25 regular season weeks. It's dating back to week 1 of last season. There have only been 3 weeks where there have been more overs than unders. So 3 overs, 15 unders, and 7 pushes. So we continue to see a small edge, at least this week, but unders continue to roll. And I think the one interesting thing going forward is people kind of like the undefeated stuff. So I'll rattle off some teams that are still showing some zeros. So Panthers don't have an ATS win yet. The Jets don't have a first half ATS cover. They're 0-6. And one fun one is the Ravens, 7-0 in the first quarter. Jets are 0-6. So we can see if those continue next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that Ravens one a little bit more with Ravens Lions that really showed out there in that spot. But the Dolphins Eagles, I think, is where I want to pivot to here, because the Eagles win 31-17. The total does go under. Really slow first quarter, only 6 points rather between the two. Second quarter, we did see 21 points, but the Eagles do cover as 3-point home favorites with a nice bounce back game after losing to the Jets last week. But like you said, 52.5 does go under. And I kind of laughed there at the end because I feel like Nick Sirianni kind of said, F your over ticket. Like they had 1st and 8 with 2 minutes to go, and they kneel it out as they should. But at the same time, they could have easily just went for it just to really ensure what was going on here. Kind of like what we saw from Sean McVay in week 2 when he kicked that last second field goal, and clearly that was not going to win the game. But the refs, man, were out of control in this game. I'm just going to say it. 10 penalties for the Dolphins, and the Eagles have none. And probably the most egregious one is that Cedric Wilson, that non-call, the face mask penalty. Like the fact that was the non-call, I thought was probably more important than the actual 10-0 for the penalties here. Just a total hack job by the referees in this game against the Dolphins, even though I do feel like this is what we've been saying about the Eagles for a few weeks now, Evan. The Eagles play to their competition. Like when it's the bigger games, they're going to show up. The weaker teams, they tend to just kind of take their foot off the gas. The Commanders, they couldn't even put up 7 points today. They scored 30 on them a few weeks ago, right? So I think that's kind of what I take away from this game, is that the Eagles, when it's against the big teams, you know that they're going to probably play well. But against the weaker teams, I think you could probably take advantage of them and maybe even take a lot of the team's underdog ATS.
Yeah, so much to say. Let's start with your last point there, which I agree with. Dolphins, I believe, 0-2 against teams above 500, 5-0 against teams below 500. So they are finding themselves in a very similar scenario where they can't beat the best. And here's the interesting one, right? The 10 penalties to 0. So only the third time in the last 30 years. Only the third time in the last 30 years you've had a team 10 or more penalties versus a team who had 0. So you don't see that discrepancy every day. And to me, it's Jalen Hurts. It's crazy. 21-3-1, 19-6 against the spread first half. So Simon Hunter's been all over this. He's been betting it, but they're just a great first half team. I'll say it again, 21-3-1 straight up. Both best marks in the NFL straight up and against the spread. So just great there. And then anytime touchdown bettors, it feels like it's kind of free money, but Tyreek now touchdown in 6 of the last 7 games. Hurts 5 of the last 6, 8 of the last 10 with a touchdown. So it feels like every time those two guys play, they're vital in the offense. So, and here's one that you're going to love. I'm sure you're going to have a comment here. So 8 interceptions now for Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
Now tied with Jimmy Garoppolo for the most in the NFL. Hurts was 66-1 to lead the category for the full season. Obviously a long way to go, but that is a fun ticket. Any thoughts there, Jill?
Well, it's hilarious that you bring that up because I talk about the plus money quarterbacks aspect of this all the time. And right now, because he's been plus money every week this year, he is the most profitable quarterback INT prop going right now. And that was some of the story of this game. More Hurts turnovers, a fumble in the first quarter, a pick six in the third quarter. Outside of those two mistakes, though, I'll be honest, Dolphins didn't do much. You could tell they
Yeah,
missed Jalen Waddle. Like when they were entering the fourth quarter, Tyreek had 13 targets. Nobody else had more than 2 targets going into the fourth quarter. There was clearly a
one
mandate
man
to
show.
feed Tyreek here.
Yeah.
And I give credit to Mike McDaniel for realizing, okay, we're not going to have Waddle, but you got to change it up, man. Like that was part of what led to that late turnover where they threw it. He threw it into double coverage, and Darius Slay gets the interception, right? And I think another big turning point for this game, Isaiah Wynn getting hurt was huge. He was their left guard. Replacement pretty much gets a holding call on the next play, which was supposed to be a Tyreek touchdown, and it gets called back because of a holding call. And I would just say going forward for the Dolphins, Dallas Goedert pretty solid today, and that just keeps reaffirming that the Dolphins continue to struggle versus tight ends. So now they're playing the Patriots coming up. Hunter Henry touchdown could be a pretty solid look next week. I mean, he scored in week 2 on them, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's where I'd be looking right now, just looking at that. But yeah, my main takeaway is that the Eagles play to their competition, and the Dolphins just maybe are still a tier below, despite their offense being pretty superior against 80% of the NFL.
I'll say this though, one last
Yeah,
stat from Tua. This is a
sure.
great one. So Eagles walked in with a 5% sack percentage, opponent sack percentage. So basically, really good defense ends up sacking a lot of quarterbacks. So in Tua's career, he started 17, now 18 road games. He is 3-8 when that defense has over 3% sack percentage, and 5-2 when it's 3% or less. So pressure tends to be an issue, and turned out that way tonight. So let's talk about Bills Pats. Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. Bills Pats. What a fun game this is, just because you get to
Nightmare.
watch the Bills get dropped down a notch, but also at the same time, you, it's not enough for you as somebody who's been on the Patriots to fall this year, where all of a sudden now it's completely changed because they're only 2-5 in the standings. But yes, Bills Patriots. Patriots win 29-25. Bills lose outright as road favorites of 7.5. We'll talk about that more in a second. And the over under at 41 total does go over. I think one of the surprising stats, you compile a lot of data for our team here at Action Network, and one of the stats that you had was about how Mac Jones was 0-14 straight up when opponents scored more than 24 points in his career. And the Bills scored 25 today, and he still comes out with a win. And Evan, I want you to explain just how historic this big spread in New England was, because we don't see this very often.
Yeah, so two just fun numbers. We'll talk about the bet percentage first. So New England walked into this game today, which is 23% of the tickets. It's according to Action Network, Action Labs. Only 23% of tickets at home. So that would be their second lowest bet game in the last 20 years, behind just Brady's return to New England. And of course, you even look at Belichick, right? Third biggest 3 games, right? 8.5, 7.5 or higher home underdog. He's covered all of them. So tends to be a decent spot. And now obviously without Brady, those numbers have looked awful when he's an underdog, but showed up today. I had Buffalo, some of Buffalo first half money that went out the window. They just looked awful. Awful all around. And then
Nightmare.
next week, New England gets Miami. So maybe a get right spot. I mean, both teams, find themselves again where Miami's off a loss, New England off a win, and that line is now 11.5, which would be New England's biggest underdog since Super Bowl 36, which is a fun one.
This was supposed to be the get right spot though for Buffalo, right? Like, you
Oh
know what I
yeah,
mean? Like like the 14-9 game with the Giants, the loss to the Jaguars the week before. The next question I have to ask you, Evan, are the Bills broken? Like, they're usually good for one dud a year, like a
sure.
Jacksonville game where the opposite Josh Allen all of a sudden goes nuts on them. But now this is 3 games in a row where they just don't look right.
I mean, they
And
scored 25 points. I mean, could have been worse. I think their defense have shown some issues, right? I mean, with White's injury, Milano's injury
it's a good
hasn't
point.
been like super great lately. So, I mean, I think on that side, there's probably a worry. I mean, I think let me look at it right now. Oh yeah, so their pass defense, 8.6 yards per attempt to Mac, no interceptions since Tua in week 4. So I think, listen, Josh Allen never going to have a clean sheet. The guy hasn't had back-to-back games without
No,
turnovers since
no.
like 2020. So it's just that's just not the player he is. But I will say this. So it looks like yards per attempt from Buffalo's offense, 6.1 today, 5.6 last week, which is obviously awful, but it was 9 in London. That's yards per play. So two bad
Hmm.
games in a row. And then if you look ahead on the schedule, Buffalo plays Tampa Bay now at home, short week. So, nothing better than short rest, get the losses out the window, and another opportunity against Tampa's defense. But we'll
For
see.
sure, yeah. And I think what we saw today too, Evan, is Bills, they couldn't really get those big splash plays over the top. I know
Yeah.
Diggs ended up scoring that wild touchdown, but that was more, I feel like that was a broken play instead of just those plays over the top to Gabe Davis or, James Cook running for an 85-yard touchdown. They didn't have a play or a completion that was over 30 yards today. And that's usually one of their things about bread and butter, especially the run game. I mean, the Pats, they got up by 12 with 7 minutes to go. And I know that you were saying like they put up 25, but they didn't really show that urgency until there was 7 minutes
You're
to go, and then they scored those 2 touchdowns, right? So I think it's good to know that the Bills can turn it on when they need to, but I think somebody needs to remind them that maybe we need to turn it on in the second quarter and maybe not late in the fourth quarter.
right.
And I think also I did find it kind of poetic that Mike Gesicki scored the game-winning touchdown because last year against the Bills with the Dolphins, and the Bills hadn't allowed a touchdown to a tight end all year. And Nick Giffen and I go on the touchdown show and say, do not take Mike Gesicki at plus 600. This is bad odds. And he scores a touchdown on this Bills defense and then scores what would have been the game-winning touchdown
Well,
over the
Gasicki might
Patriots.
score
So,
against the Dolphins next week, back to back.
yeah,
It'd be revenge game. Perfect.
him and Hunter. Oh, the revenge game angle is definitely there, especially because he was involved in week 2. But I still like Hunter Henry as well. I think both of them are in play in that game. All right, let's move on to another barn burner today. One of those games, Evan, that honestly, if somebody asked you what game do you think is going to have the most points scored today, this probably would have been my last pick. Browns Colts. Browns win 39-38.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable, that the Browns do end up winning the game, but do not cover as 3.5-point favorites. The total, as I was mentioning, because you see a 39-38 score, the total was at 40.5. So it just, to me, that was
Crazy.
unbelievable that we were able to see so many points between really backup quarterbacks. I mean, I know Deshaun Watson did start the game, but he only played one series. Browns now 2-13 against the spread after their last 15 games after a straight up win. So one of those things about consistency with this team, they're not really
Yeah.
being able to get stuff going consistently. But yeah, 61 points entering the fourth quarter. There were 4 fourth quarter lead changes. One of the things that I found really interesting, Evan, too, is this Browns defense. And, they rightfully so, they've been touted as the best defense in the NFL because they'd only allowed a total of 3 touchdowns all season coming into this game. And then the Colts score 3 touchdowns in the first half, 3 rushing touchdowns for the game. Gardner Minshew, we got the whole Gardner Minshew game in here. We got some deep passes to Michael Pittman. We got 2 rushing touchdowns. He got strip sacked twice. Yeah, an interception. And Myles Garrett was everywhere. For me, the biggest takeaway is the Browns. I think surprisingly, their defense did play well in this game, despite giving up 38 points.
Yeah, just an odd box score because you wouldn't even look at it and say Cleveland's defense played awful, but yet there was 70 points put up in the game. So to hit off one of your points, Stefanski, Browns head coach, so now 10-18 against the spread after a straight up win. That would be 134th of 142 head coaches last 20 years. So
God.
just cannot find himself a winning streak. Tough look there. I think if you watch this game, you said to yourself, oh my God, Myles Garrett, probably 4, 5, 6 times. Looking at the odds, which I think is kind of fascinating, it's him co-favorite with Micah Parsons, Defensive Player of the Year, with TJ Watt at plus 230 right behind him. So again, every week those 3 players just kind of going back and forth. But the fun stat with Garrett today, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, blocked field goal. First player since
Yes.
1991 to do that. Just he's a freak. It's every single week. Just and in terms of, we talked about this last week, the yards given up by Cleveland's defense. 1,000 yards through 5 games. They gave up 456 today. And here's the fun stat. So Minshew threw for 305 against them today. 300 passing yards. Last 2 years against the Browns would be Zappy, Flacco, and Minshew. So not the best
What a
quarterbacks
list.
that find them way into those games, but yeah, just a crazy game overall. Just lots of oddities. And then I think the thing that you really get from Minshew is like the full game experience, right? And you talked about it, but he tends to not win these types of games. So spread 4 or less, which we would call a toss-up game, he's 3-10 straight up in his career. So if I had to guess, he tends to lose by 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, just high-scoring games, and there ends up being, multiple turnovers. And here's a crazy one. So when Minshew's opponent scores more than 20 points, he's 1-15 straight up.
So the only thing that I would just push back on, and I mean, they're trends. I can't really push back too much on them. But at the same time, I feel like Minshew won this goddamn game, man. I've got a real beef with how this game ended. And my beef, again, with the refs, man. PJ Walker should have been strip sacked to end this game.
Yeah.
DeForest Buckner got the strip sack. There's a total bullshit Balo call, man, for illegal defense. Gives the Browns 1st and goal. And then it's another DPI to Donovan Peoples-Jones. It was clearly an uncatchable ball. Like, I get it. We all want the Browns to be good. We all want them to come back and be just relevant again. But come on. Like, and if you had Colts money line, like,
you're 100%
like
right.
Condolences, man.
Absolutely ridiculous. I just, the way, every time and it's just so funny because it seems like when I watched Anthony Richardson games, it was just a lot more calm. There was like sanity involved in a lot of those games. And now with Minshew, it's just something about his style and his attitude. His games are chaos. And to have a Cleveland game where there was 70 points, you just don't have that. So this was probably one of the wild ones today.
For sure. All right, Evan, more memories are made when you're there for live NFL action. And when you need tickets, our friends at Ticketmaster have got you covered. As the official marketplace of the NFL, Ticketmaster gives you more ways to find your perfect seat. Their interactive seat map gives you 360-degree previews of your section to make sure you have the best view of those pivotal plays. And if your plans change, Ticketmaster gives you more flexibility to sell or transfer your tickets. Plus, mobile tickets make getting in on game day a breeze, and you can even customize your Ticketmaster app to rep your team's colors. Find tickets today at Ticketmaster.com/NFL. Now it's time for the hot read from our own Brandon Anderson. Brandon, what do you have us looking at for early Week 8 lines?
All right, let's do a little Week 8 hot read. Bit of a tough streak here. We're getting CLV, but not getting our picks across. So let's get a win on the board. Let's go back to a just win baby teaser to get our week started out. I'm going to take the Ravens -8 at the Cardinals and the Lions -7.5 against the Raiders home on Monday Night Football. So both teams tease them under a field goal. Ravens demolished the Lions. We're taking both teams here, but I don't need to sell you on the Ravens. They obviously just had one of the best wins of the season, in my opinion. Cardinals, their bubble burst like a month ago. They got that win against Dallas. We decided that, the Cardinals are kind of frisky now. And then right about then, they kind of regressed back to bottom 5, pretty much everything as we expected. The offense has gotten worse each week. Their defense was second to worst in DVOA entering the weekend. And Baltimore basically just played a perfect game from Lamar Jackson in the offense. Todd Monken, I think, finally got his top performance he's been looking for. I think the Ravens can kind of do anything they want against the Cardinals defense. Should be able to run it up and at least win by a field goal for us. And then the Lions, look, they got crushed here, but it's a bad spot. Jared Goff outdoors, on the road, in the wind, missing a lot of guys. We kind of knew going in that's not a great spot for him. Here we are home Monday night. The Lions are a different animal at home, and this is only their second time even hosting Monday Night Football since 2014. So this is a spot where a Dane Campbell sort of team, they're going to come out with pride. They're going to come out and show that today what we saw was a fluke. So I think they take care of the Raiders, who, frankly, I don't know how this team has won 3 games. They got embarrassed by the Bears today. 30-12 to the Bears? The Chicago Bears? They had 235 yards in this game. You lose to Tyler Bagent, Division II debut as a rookie. You allow 3 touchdowns to Deontay Foreman. I mean, that's embarrassing. So these teams both got embarrassed, but I'm not going to be too thrown off by the Lions. They were my number 1 team in the power rankings. They have proven themselves throughout the season. I'm not going to let 1 week throw us off the scent. The Raiders just aren't very good. They are not a 3-win team, despite what the win-loss record says. They're a lot more like the team that just kind of got embarrassed by the Bears. So give me the Lions. Give me the Ravens. I would not be surprised if either or both of these teams get 2-9. Teaser protection, really, to stop us from doing what we're doing right now. So let's tease them. Ravens -2, Lions -1.5. Just win, maybe, by a field goal. Other hot read for Week 8. Let's go to Seattle. And give me the Seahawks, -2.5 against the Browns. I think that one possibly could get to the key number. I want to grab it below the 3. Boy, goofy game for the Browns on Sunday. RIP to our hot read under 41. Both teams just about cleared that, so that did not work out for us. I don't know how Cleveland scored 39, though. Deshaun Watson is terrible. He's apparently back, but he completed 1 pass on 5 attempts. He throws an interception. He goes out with an injury. That's not an injury. That kind of looks like he just got benched. You're getting benched this mega contract for PJ Walker, who continues to be not great. He had 2 turnovers in more incompletions than completions. And this historic Browns defense we've been talking about all year, I don't know what happened. They allowed 9 plays to the Colts of 17 plays or more. And the Colts aren't really even an explosive offense, and they're playing with a backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew. Myles Garrett effectively single-handedly wins the game for the Browns, generally half their points. Hopefully doesn't do that against Seattle. It is a bit of a risk here, but I think that we need to pay attention to the other side of the ball. We're going to get a lot of talk about Browns defense, Seattle offense. That's a fun matchup. The other side is where the bet is. Seattle's defense, actually, in the last 3 weeks, they are number 1 in EPA per play, ahead of Cleveland. And they had another really good performance against the Cardinals today. Seattle wins by double digits despite 3 turnovers to none, the deficit for them. They have an interception at the 1-yard line. They have to settle for a field goal at the 1-yard line. This was a dominant defensive performance, and Seattle should have won by a lot more. I think the offense holds up as long as the line protects them, but it's the defense that's the mismatch. Seattle is number 1 in run DVOA defense. That's Cleveland's identity. That's the one thing the Browns want to try to do. So if Seattle takes that away, now it's Deshaun Watson or PJ Walker. I don't know who it is. I don't know if Cleveland even has a quarterback, but it's got to be one of them. Seattle really is better than the numbers have looked so far. They're falling short in the red zone and on 3rd down. Historically, those things tend to even out over the season, and the Browns' defense has been elite at those items. Maybe we get some regression in our favor both ways on this one. Give me Seattle -2.5. It was 1.5 Sunday morning. I think we can hit the key number as we start to panic a bit about the Browns quarterback situation. So, hot reads for Week 8. Seahawks -2.5 against the Browns. And then our just win baby teaser, Ravens -8 at the Cardinals. Lions -7.5. Monday Night Football against the Raiders. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Brandon. And now let's talk Chargers-Chiefs. Chiefs win and cover as 5.5-point home favorites over the Chargers. But again, another under hits 49.5. Taylor's in the house. Taylor Swift in the game. She seems to be at every home game now. I thought she was on tour. I feel like her tour has a lot of breaks that just seem to coincide with games in the NFL when the Chiefs play. And I feel like Travis Kelce, he knew Taylor Swift was in the house too, because he had 142 receiving yards in the first half. He scored a touchdown. For me, I expected to be a little more excited from this game. Honestly, I feel like I was just pretty let down by the Chargers offense.
It's kind of sad. Like, I had money on the Chargers in this game. I had the 6. They were down 7 for what felt like 3 quarters. You felt like the cover was coming about 4 or 5 times, and then it just felt like the Thanos meme. It was just like the Chiefs are inevitable, and
Inevitable.
it's just honestly insane. And I'll throw some Chiefs stats out in a second. But the one thing that caught my eye, just looking at updated MVP odds, Mahomes plus 260 favorite. Next is Tua 4-1, Hurts 5-1, Lamar 7-1. So those are your new top 4. But Mahomes again atop the leaderboard. And the thing that's been getting me, and let me see if I have these. Yeah, Chiefs covered like 5 of the last 6 games. They've been like really good at covering lately, and I think a lot of teams, a lot of people who naturally believe big favorites, this and that, they've been covering some numbers, and I think it has a lot to do with their defense. Their defense looked a lot better today. Now I know there's a lot you can blame on Herbert, but when Kansas City is playing this type of defense, and just like Philly was, they're okay like sitting on it at the end of games and just getting out the door. And when I tell you, Mahomes home unders 12-3 in his last 15. It's like,
Yeah, I kind of undersold. I kind of undersold what happened in this game because the fact, like at halftime, dude, we had 41 points. Imagine betting the over, 41 points between these two teams, and then you lose. Like the fact that we just needed one more score, you figured this is going to just keep going forever, and then you don't see another score until 3.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Just to me, that was unbelievable.
It's just like the Chiefs, and for people who can't see, it's the Chiefs choke signal. Like they put their, they just
the
choke
Vader
their opponent.
signal.
Yeah, like it's like the Vader signal. It's frustrating to watch this type of Chiefs, especially when you're betting against them, because it's like just very difficult to beat. And just a few other stats that just kind of blow me away in this scenario. Mahomes now 17-0 straight up at home against under 500 teams. So when he's supposed to win, they're in Arrowhead. Always tends to happen. And then Herbert, we talked about this. I believe they were shut out in the second half. Unbelievable. Couldn't get a point. Herbert now 16, 37, and 5. You heard it. 16, 37, and 5 against the second half spread in his career. 1-4-1 this season. 6-10 last year. 5-12 the year before. 3-4 years down the line, it's not just happenstance. It's a pattern. So tough second half.
It's a decent sample now.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that I would say, Evan, is like that Chiefs secondary and their pass defense. You alluded to it. They were incredible today. Like they really shut down Keenan Allen after all the games that he's been having over the last few weeks. They only allowed 11 passing first downs by the Chargers. They average around 18 per game. Most of that was in the first half. Like 8 of those 11 first downs were in the first half. So in the second half, you're right on point. The Chargers could get nothing going. And really, you have to give credit to that Chiefs secondary and really their defense as a whole.
Definitely.
So Lions-Ravens, let's move on to that game. Now, this one was kind of a snoozer depending on your POV, but Ravens win 38-6. One of the few overs we do get with the 43.5 total, just barely getting over the total there, with the Ravens covering very easily as 3.5-point favorites. Lamar Jackson against the NFC is pretty much free money at this point, 16-1 straight up versus the NFC, and he's got the Cardinals next week.
Yeah, I believe. He's at Arizona, and then he's facing Seattle. So back to back NFC games. So maybe they can keep extending that streak. This was just, everybody all week who were like, Baltimore's the right side. Goff outdoors, all the wind. He turns into a different quarterback. I get it. Like the crazy thing is this, and I gamble with my eyes. I use numbers. It's like what I see is what I see. And I see he's just a completely different quarterback outdoors than he is inside the dome, especially now in Detroit. But it's crazy if you look at the numbers. So Goff is actually 23, 17-1 straight up on the road outdoors. And he's even 5-1 straight up in outdoors sub 40 degrees. So it's about a 500 proposition either way. I think it's just the fact that he's 28-14 indoors, 18-6 against the spread last 2 seasons, both ATS numbers. It's just he's a different player in that situation. And today, Baltimore just looked Detroit just looked completely outplayed, like on multiple
Yeah,
levels. I think you had said 4 straight drives. Baltimore covers the first quarter, first half. It was just a blowout, and Detroit couldn't get anything going.
Yeah, you alluded to that Ravens first quarter spread result. The Ravens have now outscored opponents 55-6
Crazy.
through 7 games. It's incredible. So just keep that in mind for Ravens first quarter spreads. But the Jared Goff thing, I want to expand on that a little bit more, because since the start of last year, and really since the middle of last year, where the Lions have almost been anointed as this up and coming team, I think we could buckle it down right down to home and away splits as much as it's more inside outside, because when he's at home, we see the spread. He's the most profitable quarterback at home over probably in the last few years. But same thing, his stats reflect that too. 30 touchdowns to 10 interceptions since the start of last year at home. But then you look at his road splits, and it's about 10-10. It's about 1 touchdown for every interception. His completion percentage drops. His yardage drops. It's not something that we're just making up out of the blue. This is something that is really happening, and I think we kind of got lost in track of that because of the game that they had against the Packers earlier this season. But Lamar, you alluded to it as well, just with MVP odds. He looked like MVP today. Like first half, 17 for 21 from the field, 3 touchdowns. He ran for a touchdown, and the Lions, they look DOA. Like they were out of it immediately. Mental mistakes. Really what this game reminded me of is Cowboys 49ers from a couple weeks ago, when Cowboys just laid a dud and the 49ers were pretty much just on top of them immediately. So Lions, Ravens, Lions, we'll see what happens with them dropping to 5-2, but Ravens look very strong in the AFC North. Falcons, Buccaneers, Falcons win 16. Oh, give us some more. What do we got?
No, I was going to give you one more thing. To me, that's interesting. Ravens 9.1 yards per play today against the Detroit. That is the highest in franchise history. Couldn't find another game where Baltimore had that high. So one of the best offensive days you've ever seen in Baltimore. And I think a lot of people might look at Detroit as a bounce back next week. So at home, Monday Night Football against the Raiders, where I don't think we know, the Raiders quarterback situation yet. It could be Hoyer, it could be Garoppolo. But interesting thing is Goff, 8-12-1 straight up after a loss with Detroit. So hasn't been just that simple. So we'll see.
For sure. Yeah. No, that's a good addition to that. So the fall season is in full swing, which means if you're like us, you're busy watching football. You might be so busy, you're looking for more convenient meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes. And that's where Factor comes in. Factor can help you fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time and stay on track with a healthy lifestyle. This October, if you get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle, simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/Action Network Pod50 and use code Action Network Pod50, that's 50, to get 50% off. That's code Action Network Pod50 at factormeals.com/Action Network Pod50 to get 50% off. All right, now Falcons, Buccaneers. This one we won't take too much time on, but again, I really just want to talk about how awful Desmond Ridder is as a quarterback, even though the Falcons do win 16-13 and win on the road. Bucks do not cover as home favorites, as 2.5-point home favorites, with the over-under at 37.5. Desmond Ridder, man, I'm going to talk a little bit more about his stats in a second, but from an ATS POV, 4-0 against the spread versus the NFC South in his career, 0-7 against the spread against any other team.
This is like such an impossible game to watch if you had money on either side. No team wanted to win. No quarterback wanted to win. And the winner of the game led the NFC South. So it was just very infuriating. I think I probably prefer Baker Mayfield than I do Desmond Ridder right now. I think Mayfield
doesn't feel good to say it out loud, though, does it?
Yeah, it's just like, and the thing is, when you look at the rest of that division, those are probably your best teams. Like we just saw Derek Carr fall apart again. Carolina hasn't had a win yet. It's just you're going to find one of these teams in the playoffs. Atlanta seems to have the best pieces, but a quarterback that can't stop fumbling over himself.
And I mean, the
So,
best pieces,
yeah,
they won't even let Bijan Robinson on the field. Like, I mean, I know that
there was
it
something
turned out
off
that he
there.
was
There's
sick.
something, yeah. Yeah, what was he, sick?
That to me is a big story from this game because he was not on the injury report. There were no mentions of him being injured or anything like that. And then we're sitting there in the first half and like, okay, where's Bijan? Tyler Algier is getting all the carries. Patterson rather is coming in here, and I just was getting really confused. They did clarify later on, but again, why are you spending such high picks on Bijan and Kyle Pitts and just those kinds of picks like that is really what sets a franchise back if you're not going to use them. And then you have Desmond Ridder, who is in scoring position and gets strip sacked twice.
Oh.
2 Falcons touchdowns called back and overturned at the goal line. It's like you alluded to this. It's awful football to watch, and it's even worse to bet on. So, to me, I don't really want to talk too much more about the Falcons Bucks. So please end it for me so we can move on to the next game.
Yeah, I'm good aside from the fact that Atlanta plays Tennessee next week. Tennessee coming off a bye. I have no idea what to make of that game. I think it's a pick 'em for a reason. And Tampa Bay and Buffalo, Thursday Night Football. I think that's a lot of points. I mean, maybe Baker can cover this. It's like 7.5 right now. Look ahead was 10. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that Baker's been throwing the ball, I mean, he still was able to complete a touchdown to Mike Evans, who's probably the best wide receiver he's ever played with in his career. So They still look like they have a connection. They might be able to exploit that on that Bills secondary. All right, Cardinals, Seahawks. Seahawks win 20-10. They do cover as 9.5-point favorites, even though their star wide receiver DK Metcalf did get ruled out just before kickoff, did not move the line at all. I don't think it needed to, but the over-under was at 44.5. The total did go under, but this feisty Cardinals team, man, they are always in the game. Seahawks up 17-10. They look like they're about to go up 24-10. And then you see this Geno interception in the red zone, plus 180 interception, by the way. Thank you for that. And then a Geno fumble in the fourth quarter. But the Cardinals get 3 turnovers, and they only get 3 points out of it. To me, that was the story of the game. And they gave up that late field goal to give the Seahawks the cover.
Yeah, just a frustrating game if you had Seattle. It just never should have been this close. Geno made multiple mistakes, and it just was sloppy overall. Arizona hasn't looked the same over the last few weeks. I believe they started 3-0 against the spread, and since then just can't find anything on offense. Here's a fun nugget I looked up. So Cardinals won the turnover battle 3-0 in this game, and they were 9-point underdogs. So teams as 7-point underdogs or higher, who were +3 or better in the turnover battle, were 165, 6-3. Against the spread in the wild card era since 1990. So this loss from Arizona's point of view is just you need to figure out a way to get some points on the board. You got 3 lucky balls on your side. You didn't turn over the ball, and you still couldn't muster it. So just a brutal game.
The Seahawks coming up, they're 2.5-point favorites hosting Cleveland. We don't know whether or not Deshaun Watson's going to play. Probably not. Probably going to be P.J. Walker. Would be shocked to see if that line stays at 2.5, might go up to 3.5, depending on the quarterback situation for Cleveland. Steelers-Rams. Nice little outright win by the Steelers on the road. They win 24-17 with the Rams being 3-point home favorites. The total does go under of 44. I mean, Pickett finally looked impressive in an NFL game. The preseason, that doesn't count. Like, this is an actual NFL game. He actually looked impressive in this. It was a very convincing fourth quarter drive. It was 17-17 tie, drove them down the field for a touchdown. But really the story for me, and maybe I'm just as a jaded Cowboys fan, I'm glad the Rams got to have the full Brett Maher experience. So 2 missed field goals, missed extra point. It's pretty much the difference in the score. It pretty much, once he missed that extra point where they were going to go up 10-3 and then he missed the extra point, I knew it was going to be a bad day for him. And now the Steelers, though, something to keep in mind if you're ever seeing them maybe trailing at half, they've been down in multiple first halves this season, have come back to win. So games that they weren't favored in either, like the Browns, Ravens, and the Rams game now, where they've been trailing at half and come back to win. But TJ Watt, we talked about Myles Garrett in that Browns game. TJ Watt with an unreal interception to set up a Steelers touchdown. But I think another story that was really a big takeaway for me from this game was, and it's been ongoing, is how the Rams have really no home field advantage when they're playing a very popular team. It really felt like it was a home game for the Steelers. Like when Jalen Warren scored that touchdown, you would have thought it was Heinz Field with that loud cheer.
And the thing that's funny is that you give Tomlin like certain things on the road. Like here's a fun stat I looked up before we came on. So Pickett's only thrown 1 interception in his last 6 road games. It's just really hard to beat Tomlin when not turning over the ball, playing decent defense. You know, Maher's kicking it all over the place. Like you're giving him free points. They're going to probably find a way. And then everyone's favorite dog stat. So Tomlin now 47-45 straight up, 57-31-4 against the spread as an underdog in his career. And then Matt Stafford. He just figured out a way again. This morning on Convince Me, I gave out this stat, and it ended up actually coming through. So Rams led 9-3 at the half and ended up losing 24-17. So Stafford now is 31-56-2 against the second half spread when leading. He's lost 9 straight regular season games in this spot. So just absolutely brutal. They just, and he's about 500 across the board second half ATS when he's trailing. But for some reason, can't come up with the offense. And here, it was a mess. They had multiple opportunities to kind of lock it away.
Yep.
And Pittsburgh found a way in the end. The fun one here is also road unders. In these games, good defense, and they just figure out a way to go right under it. 80-59-1 for Tomlin. Road unders, best of any coach.
Wow.
55-25-1 last decade. So,
wow,
just wild stuff. And the thing you're going to hear about all week again is just the wild numbers from Puka. Puka Nacua.
Yeah, Puka Nacua, man.
Wild.
I think the main thing that I would take away from that is the Rams, to me, might have overtaken the Steelers as the best team with like an eye on wide receiver talent late in the draft.
Sure.
Cooper Kupp was a 3rd, 4th round pick. Puka Nacua, same thing. He looks like a top 5 wide receiver right now. Clearly was picking up the slack because they completely shut down Cooper Kupp. 2 catches for 29 yards. He had 9 catches for like 150 yards. Just looked incredible with the rookie out of BYU. All right, we got a few games left. Let's run through these quick. Raiders-Bears. Bears win 30-12. One of the few overs of the day. And the Raiders lose as road favorites, as 2.5-point favorites, because honestly, I was shocked, Evan. Brian Hoyer hadn't been a road favorite since 2014 with the Browns. And all I could think to myself is, imagine making Brian Hoyer a road favorite in 2023. Like, what league is this? Aiden O'Connell comes in. Raiders immediately score a touchdown. He's all cagey in the post-game press conference about how this isn't preseason anymore. You know, Jimmy Garoppolo is expected next week. But another takeaway, too, Tyson Bagent.
Sure.
They said on the broadcast that he won the Division II Heisman Trophy from out of his school. But he looked pretty good. Justin Fields, he might be out of a job, you know, as the season goes. But at the same time, they've got a lot invested in Justin Fields. But it's good to know that Tyson Bagent could come in and look like a competent quarterback. Commanders-Giants. Giants win 14-7. Total goes under of 37. But the Commanders lose outright as 3-point favorites. Giants are now 8-2 against the spread in their last 10 games versus the Commanders. And the Sam Howell, the sack numbers, Evan, please elaborate. You tweeted about this earlier. It is getting out of control.
Yeah, I believe right now he has 40 sacks. He had 6 today, and he is 3 off pace through 7 games. And it's, you know, every time you see this list, it's David Carr, Sam Howell, David Carr. So 2005, 2002 with the Texans, but 6 sacks today against a Giants team who doesn't get pressure. Oh boy.
Yeah, you don't want to be on a list with David Carr ever. And I think one of the funny things about this game too is that the Giants come into this game, they only had 5 sacks for the season. Well, they had 5 sacks in the first half. Like, that's how crappy right now this Commanders offensive line is. Let's wrap this up though. Packers Broncos. probably the snoozer of the day. Broncos win 19-17, but the Packers do lose as 1-point favorites. This game flipped back and forth between Packers and Broncos all week, going through 0, but the under hits at 45. I'll be honest with you, Evan. I feel like Kevin Harlan was trying to make this game more exciting than it actually was, because like Courtland Sutton, he catches this touchdown. You would have thought it was a Kobe Bryant dunk from 2003, like, oh, just suck the gravity out of the building. Like, that's what it felt like. It was just a regular touchdown, dude. Like, obviously good touchdown, but like this game was awful, really. Like, the only other notable thing to take away from this game is the Broncos quarterback, Kareem Jackson. He should probably be thrown out of the league at this point, man, because this is the fourth time this season that he's got a defenseless player penalty, and has been thrown out of 2 games now. It's kind of getting out of control. It kind of reminds me of Pac-Man Jones back in the day. But that's probably the biggest takeaway, is that the Broncos do win, and they had to almost decapitate a guy to do it. So, yeah. So, all right, now we're going to check in with Patrick Everson with Vegas Insider to see how Sportsbook's fared in Las Vegas for Week 7.
Thanks a lot, Jill. Yeah, it was another interesting day in Las Vegas, and not necessarily, and really for sportsbooks across the country, and not necessarily on the bettors side of the betting window. I had one odds maker tell me as the Bills game was unwinding against the Patriots, and he was talking about the Kansas City Chiefs game. He's like, we've got tons of money line parlays running to the Chiefs. We are going to need the Chargers in that game really good, unless Buffalo doesn't come back and win this game against the Patriots. Buffalo came back, got the lead, did not win the game against the Patriots, though. So that blew up tons of not only moneyline parlays, but also teasers as well that were running to Buffalo. So that was a big result behind the counter for most books, including BetMGM, which was seeing pretty hefty action on Buffalo. So BetMGM did well to that. Several other odds makers noted that they did do well to that. But there's always an exception to the rule. And we had one odds maker here in Vegas, longtime odds maker, said, believe it or not, we had a lot of money on the dog, on the Patriots in that Buffalo game. He said it wound up being okay with the Bills losing outright. He said, but if the Bills had come back and won but not covered, which is how it was looking, it might shake out near the end there. He said, we would have lost. He said, I just got flooded with dog money. We needed the favorite, which was definitely an unusual situation. But it goes to show that it's not always the same at every book. Yes, the public tends to be on certain teams heavily from week to week to week, but every now and then there's some variance from one book to another. And in this case, an odds maker actually would have done pretty poorly if the Bills had managed to win but not cover there. Did okay to the Bills losing, but not as good as some of these other books who were literally raving about this win. And speaking of raving, let's go to the Ravens, who just whitewashed the Detroit Lions today. Detroit is the public darling now. I mean, this is a team that went into Week 7 over the last 16 regular season games, which is their last 16 games because they didn't make the playoffs. 13-3 straight up, 14-2 against the spread, just absolute scorching hot, an ATM for bettors, and got hammered. Just ran into a buzzsaw at Baltimore. That was another really good result behind the counter for most books because, again, the public has definitely been on Detroit, liking Detroit a lot. Probably going to be on them again in Week 8. I'll get to that in a little bit here. So those were a couple of results early that definitely went very much in the book's favor. The Chiefs game, obviously the public's going to be all over the Chiefs, so the public did well there, but the Chiefs were in everybody's moneyline parlays and teasers as well. So, or rather, the Chiefs were in moneyline parlays and teasers that probably evolved or were connected to, I should say, that Bills game. So a lot of the, as I noted earlier, a lot of the Chiefs moneyline parlays and teasers got blown up, even though the Chiefs covered and had not too much trouble winning against the Chargers in that late window. This night game, it's been really interesting. The Sunday night game between the Eagles and the Dolphins, two really great teams, two very public teams. And there were multiple books saying they got a really good two-way action. BetMGM was in an interesting spot, seemed heavy to the Eagles on the spread and to the Dolphins on the money line. So perhaps ideally, especially with moneyline teasers and parlays probably getting blown up by the time you got to Sunday night, or perhaps getting blown up, maybe in the situation that's not unusual, and that's where they need the favorite to win and the underdog to cover. So that may be the position they ended up in there. Monday night, look, you're not going to get people out the 49ers, even with that loss last week at Cleveland. And I know earlier on Sunday at BetMGM, most of the money comes in on this game on Monday, but It was very heavy spread tickets and money, at least percentage wise, very heavy to the 49ers, not hesitating to pull the trigger, even though no Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, perhaps maybe a little bit limited, but it looks like he's going to go. So there's certainly going to be Vikings fans tomorrow night. And bonus, everybody, we get to look ahead to next week because, the NFL stops for nobody. And obviously the odds are already up for NFL Week 8. I think the one thing that's interesting coming out of the gate, it's not the most intriguing game, although I believe it is a primetime game. I think, in fact, it might be the Monday night game between the Raiders and the Lions. And that is that the Lions, after getting decimated by Baltimore 38-6, and the Raiders, completely embarrassing loss to a quarterback nobody has ever heard of. The Lions opened 7, and this is already on the move. On Sunday night, this went from 7 to 7.5 with one odds maker that I spoke with, and he termed it one-way traffic on the Lions. And he says, I don't expect this to change, as Detroit is a very public team. And even though they got blown out, so did the Raiders, and the Raiders did so against a much worse team. Everybody agrees that Baltimore is a pretty good outfit. So that's the one gem to look at. Already some early movement on that game in the Week 8 odds market. Lions from 7 to 7.5 early. Throw it back to you, Gilles. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you for listening to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Enjoy Monday Night Football and keep an eye out for all of our NFL Week 8 podcasts right here on the Action Network.